Hey guys, welcome back to more Karen stories. In this video, an insane Karen called the police on me when I put up a fence around my property after she repeatedly trespassed. Let's dive right into the video. So for starters, I love to garden. I don't mean to brag, but my front yard looks way more alive than the rest of my neighbors. I get compliments all the time and love to share tips with most of my neighbors who want to learn. All the plants are well maintained and I spend a lot of time making sure nothing bothers them, even though I was confident at the time that the only thing I should be worried about was the weather. Man, I wish. With that being said, I don't like the HOA, at least not the one running my area. They overstepped one too many times with how I was running my house, specifically very small builds, grass height, driveway cleaning, etc., and within a few years of living there, I opted out of it. I thought that having the paperwork that said no one could legally judge me for how I ran my property, which again was not disturbing anyone not trying to get money out of me, would make me feel more at peace, but apparently not. I will keep her name private, so let's just call her Karen. Karen is my next door neighbor, mid-30s, with a stuck-up attitude that never fails to introduce itself before a word even leaves her mouth. She is a board member of the HOA and never lets anyone forget it. She is absolutely one of the upfront reasons I left it in the first place. It's rumored that she has a history of overstepping her power regardless of your relationship with the HOA though. Some of the other neighbors that I'm friends with describe her as a cartoon, snobby, rich lady next door. I like that. It's unbearably accurate. Usually though, I expect this kind of snobbiness from the super rich surrounding me. I don't have anything against wealthy people, and I would say I'm relatively well off myself, but I've yet to meet someone of Karen's status who is a reasonable person who doesn't look down on everyone else whenever we don't recognize Her Majesty's power. There's even a small group in the surrounding neighborhood who throw so-called anti-HOA parties every year when they count up the bills they got. It's usually in the thousands and it's usually from Karen. Recently she's picked up the hobby of venturing through my front yard without any reason or permission. I tried sending a polite email to her asking her to stop, but I never got a response. Sometimes she will take pictures of my plants, sometimes she just cuts through the grass and relaxes there, and other times she has even picked one of my flowers. That third one was the last straw for me. I did not have the courage or willpower to go and talk to her, so instead I took money out of my own pocket to put up a fence. Nothing fancy, nothing outside of the HOA's guidelines, even if I had to follow them, just what I thought was a subtle indication that I did not want people on my property and thus closing it off to outsiders. Well, then the next day there she was sitting on my lawn. She had climbed over the fence and I could tell this was because it was now leaning a bit to the side. Obviously, I was completely appalled and finally felt angry enough to confront her in person. I never swore at her or anything, but I told her upfront that she had no right to be on my property, and the biggest reason I put up the fence was to keep her out. Well, she decided to play the innocent child card by acting all confused about what she was doing there, but she quickly gave it up when she saw I was not budging. According to her, because she and I were a part of the HOA, again not true on my part, my lawn was a so-called public space and she could do whatever she wanted since she was not going inside my house. Apparently, and with no evidence of course, she had permission from the HOA to perform routine checks on the residents she overlooked to make sure everything was okay. She also tried to make some excuse that the fence was outside regulations and that it disrupted the community aesthetic, whatever that meant. I pointed out that it was not true and that I could promise her if I asked any other HOA official, they would tell her that she was trespassing instead. I ordered her one more time to get off my property and she threw a little tantrum. She then threatened to call the police if I kicked her out because she had a right to be on my property and conduct her HOA checks. I was trying to be patient here, but at this point I was barely holding myself back. I started yelling over that I was not even part of the HOA and that even if I was, that still does not give her the right to be on my property and do, well, for better or worse, I told her to do it. I said that I had all the paperwork that said I was not part of the HOA anymore, so if she really wanted to make a fool of herself, she could go ahead and call the cops. She did not budge and just kept complaining about how I had no respect for the establishment she represented and was keeping me safe, completely ignoring my interruptions of offering to show her the paperwork for the fence and my HOA involvement. Honestly, looking back, it just feels like a comedy skit, but in the moment I was unbelievably pissed off. As one last attempt to get her off, I threatened to get a restraining order on her and slammed the door. It was not as satisfying as I wanted it to be, but I hoped it was enough to get her to leave. However, it was not. About an hour later, I got a knock on the door. I assumed it was Karen coming back for round 2, so I mentally prepared myself for that grating personality. Imagine my utter shock to see a police officer, probably twice my size, glaring at me when I opened it. My heart was racing, and for a second I thought he was gonna push past me to get inside my house. Honestly, it all happened so fast, I did not even have time to process the ridiculousness. I was not hiding anything illegal or anything, but the adrenaline was making me think up crazy scenarios, all of them ending with me getting jailed. However, after I calmly asked if something was wrong, he told me that he had a complaint from one of my neighbors that I was harassing her and unjustly forcing her out of a public space. Well then, I glanced around him and there was Karen, shaking and crying as another officer was trying to calm her down. It was a laughable performance, but no one had called her out yet. A couple of my neighbors were watching from the other side of the street, probably from hearing Karen's hysteria. Trying to calm myself, I explained the situation and how Karen was completely in the wrong since I had evidence of all my rights and that she was trespassing. As I talked, she kept saying how I was being aggressive and that I did not know who she was. She wanted to press charges, all the good stuff. The other cop tried to get her side of the story, but from what I heard later, she could not even keep up a straight story. First it was that I was denying her access to my yard, and then it was me harassing her, then it was that I verbally threatened that I was gonna do something bad to her or something. By this point though, I had weirdly calmed down. There was just so much evidence I could provide in under a minute. I asked the officer if he wanted to see the security tapes from around the house on my phone. Apparently Karen did not consider that part since she seemed to go quiet after I said that. I showed the officer the camera I set up in the front yard. It did not have great audio, but it was obvious that Karen just wandered into my yard and almost knocked over the fence and had an angry conversation with me. It was really obvious that at no point was I aggressive and the officer agreed. I actually felt bad for the guy. From the moment he got there, he just seemed annoyed, probably wanting to do something useful to the community rather than deal with this random entitled lady. Just to make sure, I recounted all our past conversations, my exemption from the HOA, and the reputation Karen had around here. I then showed past times she had trespassed on the cameras, including the time she picked my flowers. There were 12 total times that she did this, with many of them happening after I gave her a warning in the mail. I gave the cops access to everything that I thought would help, including the fence documentation, my HOA exclusion documents, and within minutes the cops had left the scene, despite Karen's complaining. She eventually stormed off without another word. So then, later that night, I got a call from the station, checking in to see if Karen had bothered me again and to tell me that after reviewing the evidence, they said everything was fine. They also told me that it issued a formal warning to Karen about making false accusations and harassing people with or without her HOA privileges. I was honestly thrilled. Finally, after all this time, she had gotten herself into something she couldn't weasel out of. It felt so freeing that I and my neighbors were not gonna have to deal with her BS rules anymore. Honestly, I'm more upset at myself than her. If I just called the cops on her earlier, this probably could have been done with much earlier and I could have had a nicer relationship with the HOA. I'm still debating going back into it because I assume there's at least one other person approving the fees that I obviously don't support, but that can wait for another day. It was not that I became some hero or something, it was just that Karen became a villain, and that is exactly the way I wanted it. As word spread about what happened, the upper HOA members quickly caught wind of the situation and revoked her privileges. They also sent me a kind letter apologizing for her behavior and that they will respect my privacy from now on. She is still fine, living in her big fancy house, but she has gotten much quieter and I rarely see her. All I wanted in the first place was to be left alone, and now I had that. I wouldn't say that my neighbors were scared of me now, but the incident serves as a cautionary tale for the rest of the snobby HOA members who try to eat into our personal lives whenever they can. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Karen broke into my shop, trespassed on my property, and then lost a finger at my business. I've owned my own woodworking and hardware store for close to 10 years, and I've been doing business outside of a brick and mortar shop for almost 30. I am the sole owner and employee, which gives me a lot of flexibility for hours and how I work. The draw that I use to bring customers into my shop is that I have some equipment in my store that I use to start or work on projects while I am there. I usually keep small whittler tools in my pockets that I'll break out if I'm having a slow day, and I'll usually have a few people watch while I work. I do have a separate workshop in my home, which is above my store, with much larger machines and some of the more dangerous saws, but my shop does have a small buzzsaw in the back that I use from time to time. It is behind a marked-off area and you would need to physically lift a fence of chains in order to get to it, but it's there with a protective cover when it is not in use. One day, I was approached by an older woman who wanted to know how much it would cost and how much time it would take to have a piece of wood cut into small squares that had to be an exact measurement. She was creating some sort of decoration for her home and would be painting each of the squares that would hang on her wall. Because of how many cuts she was asking for and how precise the measurements needed to be, I gave her what I deemed to be a reasonable price. However, I would have to take the piece of wood home with me, since the small saw I had in the store did not have a ruler. Taking it home would require me to close for the day, so I told her that she would need to pick up her finished pieces the next day, just so that I don't lose business. The woman was not happy, insisting that I should be able to do the job for her right then and there, because of the saw that I had in the back of my shop. I told her the reason why I couldn't use it and insisted that I would need to go to my workshop at home to complete the job. She then left the store and then came back in with the piece of wood. She set it down at my counter and waited for me while I worked with another customer. Me, yes, this is what you are looking to have cut? Her, yes, but I want to speak to your manager about how you talk to me. Me, ma'am, I'm the sole owner and employee of this store, so I'm technically the manager. Her, getting red in the face. No, you cannot be the owner and work here. I want to talk to your manager. And by the way, Ripestars, I just noticed that probably most of these entitled Karens don't understand what being self-employed means. Thank God I've never had the honor of meeting such a Karen. But then again, I also don't have a physical storefront for Reddit stories. Anyway, this goes on for a few more minutes, but it seems to finally hit her that she's not getting anywhere with me. So she takes her wood and leaves the store, but not before screaming that she will get me fired for my rude behavior, and I'm left with a few customers asking what in the world just happened. The next day, I start coming down from my home to see a car already in the lot across from my shop. I don't think anything of it until, as I open up my shop door, I hear a loud scream of pain. I ran as fast as I could towards it and saw the woman from the day before next to the saw that I had in the back of my shop. The saw's protective cover was off and the saw was turned on, the chains were on the ground and the woman was holding her hand to her chest. The first thing I did was turn the saw off and then I ran to my counter to dial for the police and an ambulance. The ambulance got there first and the woman was crying and screaming that she did something to her hand. I could only stand and watch in horror as one of the ambulance drivers went around the back of the saw and picked up the woman's pointer finger from the floor. The woman then started to scream at me, claiming that if I was not so selfish, this would have never happened. I quickly thought, well, if you would not have trespassed, this would not have happened either. What the hell? The police came in next and the woman had been rushed to the hospital to try and save her finger. I was questioned and had to explain that she had been in my store before and her outburst the day before. I showed the police that there was a barrier around the saw so that people in the store couldn't get to it without me seeing, and that the saw did have a protective cover on it and the blade, so if someone was behind the barrier, they would need to remove the covers in order to get to the dangerous part of the machine. They thanked me and told me they would get in touch with me after speaking to the woman. I decided to close up shop so I could get someone to clean up the mess the woman made. I didn't know how much blood had gotten on my equipment and I didn't want to risk contamination. I was given the all clear before the end of the day that I could go back into my shop, and while I waited, I began searching for a lock that I could use on the saw's controls just to make sure this never happened again. Well, the next day, I opened up my store and was greeted by the police at my door. They wanted to tell me in person what occurred when they spoke to the woman at the hospital. She was insistent that I was pretending to be the owner of the store and did not allow her any business. When the police questioned her about what she was doing in my shop before business hours, she tried to make an excuse that I had told her it was alright to come in and use the saw to cut her a piece of wood by herself. Of course, that didn't match up with what I told the police, and they had questioned another customer that had been in the shop when she had her meltdown to corroborate with my story. The woman kept trying to blame me for her cutting her finger off and told the police that she would sue me. The police wanted to know if I wanted to press charges on her, and I told them I wouldn't, since I didn't want to go through a process that could have me losing business while being in a legal battle. Well, the police did tell me that because the woman essentially broke into my place of business, I could ban her from the store and she would also be fined for the damages done to my equipment. Nonetheless, the woman did try to get into my store one more time after she got out of the hospital. I had to stop her at the door to make sure she didn't come in, and she again threatened to sue me and make sure my store was closed for good. Instead, a nearby bystander called the police on her for harassment, and she was fined again. I have not seen her come by again. Note for context as to why my shop door was open before I arrived at it: I live in Norway and it's not uncommon for people in my country to leave doors unlocked. And yeah guys, if you would have been in OP's situation, would you have pressed charges on the Karen, or how would you have handled the situation? Let me know in the comments, and while you're at it, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much, and the next one is a forklift malicious compliance story. Years back in my early days of employment, early 2000s, when I worked on the loading dock, we were expecting a big load of tech and products for the new office layout. Some fancy upgrades and big tech, sending the latest computers and network equipment, plenty of expensive equipment, and my boss told me to keep the trucks coming and going as smooth as possible, so we had the team on with a few extras. My responsibility was to get the unloaded pallets and stack them out of the way and ready for return to their owner. Company-owned pallets have to be returned. At 6 AM I recaffeinated and started the forklift and got to stacking the chap pallets ready for collection. Around 8:30 one of the main representatives came in early and parked on the dock. This was a problem as the trucks were scheduled for roll-in at 9 AM, and I asked him to use the main car park and he told me to F off and do my job. Well, my job was to make sure the truckies had unobstructed access to the loading dock, and I interpreted this as, I'm too important, put it somewhere for me. So to keep from damaging the car too much, I slid a chap pallet under it and got to lifting it, and I put the offending BMW up on a stack of pallets, the entire time singing, "Nothing lifts like a crown" for picking it up and putting it down. We had a crown forklift, and the rest of the crew were in stitches laughing. Many of the truckies rolled up and knew immediately that I was on duty. Those guys always had the best stories from, and some of them had a good chuckle and made off with a fresh cup of coffee. The day was going smoothly, and we worked that forklift dry as the last pallet came off the tank on the forklift emptied. As I dropped off the last pallet, well, we got that unpacked and used a tuck, a small electric cart puller, to drag the forklift out of the way. So I contacted the boss and told him to get me a payment slip to go get the tank filled at a fuel station. He came down with the form, and the representative was all smiles and thanks for the purchase of bulk computers and hardware, but that changed when he spotted his BMW. He was pissed and threatened my job, demanded to my boss that I get fired. I just looked at my boss and said, well, we should look at the security cameras. When my boss reviewed the security footage, he pointed out that I did ask him to move and park somewhere else. He then looked at me and said, thanks for another day, see you tomorrow. The rep wanted the car down immediately, and I said, we can't. The propane tank for the forklift is empty and gas delivery is tomorrow at 6 AM. My boss handed me the payslip for refilling the forklift tank, and he said to get the gas in the morning. The rep spat some more obscenities and said this will be tacked onto the bill if his car is damaged, and he said it won't take much more than a postage stamp to send his boss the footage of him obstructing their loading dock, and then my boss looked at him and tapped the sign that said, "This is a loading dock, park at own risk, we are not liable for towing or moving your vehicle, fines apply." Well, the next day, after detaching the tank from the forklift, I lodged that bugger to my car and drove off to get it filled. Upon returning with a charged tank of liquid work juice for the forklift, I started that bugger and got to moving the BMW down from its perch and ready for the rep to collect. So it is 6:30 AM and he has not arrived, so I decided to place this thing in the nearest accessible parking spot on the street ticketed spot, as our car park was not open yet. It was the only safe place available. I contacted my boss and told him and said, "Call the rep, it's ready for collection, it's in spot XX on the parking meter line." He responded with an okay. Then I got to work sending off the pallets for the day. It was a half-shift day for me. Now, as for Mr. Representative, he did manage to collect his car before it was ticketed for not feeding the meter, and I heard through my boss the rep got chewed out and screwed out of his sales bonus for acting like a douchebag. Damn, I miss that boss. And yeah guys, I gotta say, that was a pretty epic boss. Props to him for not throwing his employees under the bus. The next one is another malicious compliance story. Background: I work in security and our company has many different clients and no fixed posts, so I jump from site to site. The site in question, client, is one of the more complicated sites for us and has an awful work atmosphere. We man the gates, and next to the normal truck traffic there are also multiple visitors coming, some of them so often that you basically know them by name, and we just open the gate for them because they are here every day. One of the middle managers, Power from Client, is one of those people that think they are the most important person in the world as soon as they get a little bit of power. For example, when Power got into middle management. Now the story, Power decided that this way everybody could just come and go in. So we got the new order to not let anyone external in without getting the okay from the person responsible for them. Every external, you say? Okie dokie. This alone made DHL, UPS and so on not happy since we stopped them now and first called the people who take the packages from them, making them also really annoyed. Then it happened. Some very important people came for an appointment with Power first thing in the morning. Something much money was hanging on. The good girl I am, I tried calling Power for 15 minutes, but no answer. Well, guess I cannot reach Power. Means I cannot let the very important people in. I told them, so sorry. Obviously they were not amused. But my idea that they could bill Client for their wasted time made them less unamused. Power came 15 minutes later. His car had issues. He told me that he has a very important meeting and if important people come, they can go directly to him. I then told him the sad news that they were already here and I tried to call Power for 15 minutes, but after I couldn't reach him, I did send them away as our new instructions demanded me to do so. The instructions were very quickly withdrawn to the earlier system where we could let people in even if we know who they are without needing to ask first. And the next one is another petty revenge story. And by the way, let me know in the comments whether you enjoy the petty revenge and malicious compliance stories. This happened just now when I called a Bolt driver to pick my family for a ride to the local lake. As some background info, the app became very successful where I live because the cars are cleaner and the drivers are usually friendlier than those of the taxi cab companies. Some taxi drivers caught on and switched companies believing they could continue their shady ways there. Taking detours to increase the cost, having personal stuff in the cargo bay, smoking while driving, you get the gist of it. To the story though, my family wanted to go swimming in the lake, which is located on the other side of our city. My sister wanted to take the bus, but I suggested a Bolt because the bus station has no shade and there are some constructions being done to the road leading to us. My husband and son obviously agree because neither like the bus and the car would be faster, so I order a driver. The app says it will take him about 6 minutes because he needs to finish another ride. Nothing uncommon, no worries. My son is excited, hubby and sister are optimistic, so we chat away. After about 2 minutes, my son asks to watch the progress, which he often does, and suddenly wonders why the driver is further away. I take a look and indeed, the driver went the opposite direction passing a store. We surmised that there might have been a construction site too, or that he wanted to bypass ours and continued chatting. After another 2 minutes, I check my phone and notice him circling a kindergarten. Maybe he wanted to take a shortcut and noticed he couldn't get through. We continue our conversation. After some more minutes, I see the driver getting to a crossing which might lead our way. Finally, the city must be full of construction sites today. I relax a little, but to my surprise, he continues ahead towards the train station, not us. At this point, I realize that he doesn't intend to pick us up. He intends for me to get bored and cancel the ride in, which case he gets a fee anyway. So I start fuming. I write him a message stating that I noticed him having difficulties getting to my location and that I don't mind him cancelling so that someone else might come. The driver does not reply, but gets on the next main street. Possible directions: one way towards us, the train station a little further away, and a big hardware store very far away. Well, he chooses the hardware store. I try to call him, but he doesn't answer. At this point, I've had enough. The driver already wasted about 11 minutes of our time. The bus was long gone by now too. My husband calls another car on his phone while I write a complaint to the app including a screenshot of the driver and his car and decide to wait. This driver is not gonna drive me anywhere, but I'll be damned if I cancel now. I will let him get to the corner of my street and then cancel. After all, two can play this game. My husband's car gets to us in less than 5 minutes. In all this time, my driver continues to take the scenic route. After a total of 16 minutes, he's got enough and cancels himself. I'm very happy to have ruined 16 minutes of this man's life after he tried to cheat me for my money. Thank God I was not in a rush, otherwise I might have been forced to pay the cancellation fee. The next one is titled Revenge on Dumb Company Boss. So last year our company went through a reorganization, in other words fire people and give more work to people still left with the company while paying us peanuts. We are a small company with less than 200 employees and trying to retain our government customers while big companies like Amazon Cloud will replace us in less than 10 years. The government customers love working with us because it is the only thing we do and treat the customers better than big contractors who don't care. They laid off 30 people from my team of 50. So now 20 people do the work for 50 people at the same salary. We are paid by the month and not work hours, and we don't get sales bonuses, which is important in the story. I got a habit of reviewing everything carefully and spending hours on each contract, even one that just makes us a few $1,000s. Government vendor selection process is slow and they are very risk-averse, so a lot of customers start a few $1,000s and end up in an 8 or 9-figure contract if everything goes well. Since people were laid off, I was struggling with the work volume, and as a result, contracts were piling up. The sales director, in other words different team, did not like me as I was slow and also catching any tricks the sales team tried to play by overpromising the customer or something shady. Government clients and customers loved working with me, the support I provided, and was truthful regarding our capability and our drawbacks. This was something else the director hated me for, since he thought I am tanking sales. However, almost all my clients were repeating customers for over a decade. Example, sales wanted a school district to buy outdated Dell Windows laptops while the entire state was moving towards new cheaper Chromebooks. Schools don't have budget and whatever they buy stays for 5+ years. Sales were offloading expensive useless stuff to get better bonuses and also charge customers nearly $1 million to provide IT support for faults arising from ancient hardware. During my conversation with the school district, I shared examples of state governments in the Northeast buying Chromebooks and saving money while future-proofing the hardware. My job was to get the best quote to the customer and develop trust to sign a 5 or 10-year contract. So this school district bought Chromebooks which were 40% cheaper and had less than 20% of the previously quoted IT support cost. As a result, the sales team lost a few $1,000s in bonus, but we brought this customer with us for a 5-year contract. The sales director got pissed as I was working on small contracts at a slow pace and reprimanded me in front of our manager. The manager did not care and did not defend me and asked, "Why don't you follow what the sales director says and stop fussing over small contracts?" I said small contracts turn into big ones and hence I should pay attention to them as well. Mistakes in small contracts could harm us if the contract becomes big. So I am struggling at work because you gave me the job of 3 or 4 people. At this point he was shouting at me that I don't understand contracts. He has been doing this stuff for 5 years and he makes more money in a month than I do in a year, so I should listen to him and not question him. This was a bit insulting as I live in a shared apartment and I am struggling to make ends meet while he drives an expensive luxury car and just goes out on fancy lunches with government employees. I asked the sales director to send an email with a list of suggestions to improve my work. He then rudely complied and said, "Can you not even remember what I just said in the meeting?" His email said, "Don't review contracts less than 100K and trust sales team that due diligence has been done." I replied by copying my manager in the email that this could create liability in the future and want him to confirm again that the sales team will do financial and legal compliance themselves for the small contracts, and I need to stop revising small government contracts below 100K with no exceptions unless told otherwise. This was gold. So cue the malicious compliance. Instead of 2 hours, I spent 10 minutes on small contracts and voila, backlog cleared and I am home by 6:30 p.m. Now, a contract worth 10K comes through. I found some issues with this contract since it said that we offer 30% rebates to our software providers. This was something we stopped doing 5 years ago and now we just offer software providers a 5 to 10% rebate on contracts. Also, I knew the government client recently got a massive budget and was on a spending spree, which is part of my job. There is a high chance that this $10,000 customer will become a $100 million one and the 30% rebate means we have to give $30 million on top of the usual cost. But I remembered what the sales director said and why don't you follow what the sales director says and stop fussing over small contracts? So then, 10 minutes later I email, "No issues detected based on compliance check by the sales team." As I mentioned, government contracts are slow, no one cared and raised the 30% rebate issue since it was just a $10,000 customer. 10 months later, the state government customer said they want to work with us and get at least the same terms or better terms for a new $50 million contract. This was the largest contract in our company's history. The sales director happily gave him a handshake deal that we will offer the same or better terms. Government can legally just buy more on their current contract, so the sales director had no issues promising the same terms. Given the contract size, everyone from legal, IT and finance gets involved to work on just one contract. For 3 months, everyone worked on one contract. The sales team was giddy that they will get $1 million bonuses. I don't get a sales bonus to ensure I protect customers and the company. The finance team finishes their review and said the company is gonna lose $8 million and not make any money. Everyone is shocked. The sales director gave a deal without checking with us, and we cannot go back on something we offer. Changing contract terms is frowned upon by the government, and they have legal contracts stating, nothing will change. We are legally obligated to offer the government the same terms for 3 years. The legal team says we need to take a hit on our balance sheet and swallow the losses. The CEO called a big meeting in a fancy conference room with big TV screens, and everyone had to find a scapegoat to take the blame. Every department lead, managers and people involved in this contract were summoned. The sales leader had to explain to his team why they won't get bonuses on this big contract they spent over 3 months on. Finally, legal and finance meet and share their findings. We lost money due to the 30% rebate clause. The sales director goes crazy and blamed me in front of everyone and asked me to pack my stuff in front of 30 people. Follows by saying that I am terrible at my job despite 100% customer satisfaction. So I calmly opened my laptop and connected the display cable and opened Outlook while displaying his mail on 3 big TV screens stating that I should stop reviewing small contracts. While all 30 people read the email with a faint smile, I await the sales director's reaction. He goes into rage mode claiming I misunderstood his email and I am terrible at my job. Then I scroll down where he ignored my warning regarding potential liability to the company, and his response explicitly asked me to ignore that. His face turned white when he realized he effed up. He then blabbered trying to find some other scapegoat making racist tirades against our IT consultants in Vietnam and just lost it. Aftermath, I was told to spend 2 to 3 hours on each contract, and the company eventually figured out that it is cheaper for them to hire 20 people like me and pay us $70K every year than to take big losses on their contracts. Our team has 40 members now, still less than 50, but enough to offset the contract volume. Because of the losses, sales director had to pay back his previous year's bonus as he had a clawback clause with the company. In other words, if you screw up, you need to pay us. The sales director had to pay nearly $300K and was fired from his job. The present day, he then sued our company for wrongful termination, and we just heard today that he lost the case and now owes us another $200K in legal fees. Now he owes over $500,000 to our company. Update number 1. A lot of people may ask why I am still doing this job which pays less than state wages, and I might be able to make more in other companies. So I help government customers buy good stuff from many hardware and software companies so they don't overpay or rely on one big company. I feel proud when I can save tax dollars and help customers. During COVID, a lot of state governments went remote, in other words local meetings on Zoom, and keeping the government running while working from home. There was a budget freeze due to COVID, the economy shutting down, and since COVID relief bill was months away, this was a time when the sales team had helpless government customers willing to sign anything just to get remote hardware and software. I saw this as extortion, and despite being an introvert who lacks initiative to get promoted, I was able to convince the CEO to offer free 60-day trials of expensive hardware and just charge setup and transportation fees. This was a big risk, but we brought an insurance company to offset any damages. I convinced the CEO that this is the time for us to show that we are partners with the government and it was an emergency. The sales team was mad for a month and then realized that all those free customers were calling us for paid contracts over companies that are 10 times our size that would usually win contracts by lobbying or taking government decision makers to expensive lunch or something like Super Bowl tickets. I legally cannot disclose the exact government entity by name, but I can vaguely say that some entities in the state government of New York and the state government of Florida were both using this trial program during the first wave of COVID. I might change jobs soon since we got a 3% salary hike in the current market while the company has nearly doubled its revenue in a few years. Update number 2, I just remembered another story that made sales leaders hate me even more. So this was during the COVID wave when we were all working from home and I was getting used to Zoom. We had a telecom contract with the state government during COVID and everyone joined a Zoom call to discuss the contract. The sales team was increasing this customer's telecom bills from $60K a month to $300K a month. I objected that increased calls during COVID are not high enough to justify such a big price hike and we should increase the bill to 100k a month. This was enough to cover the cost and even improve profit margin %. But the sales team started laughing and saying if the customer can pay more and is ready to pay more, why am I being so vocal? Leadership asked me to shut my mouth and proceeded with a $300,000 contract. So then I started working on some other stuff and minimized the Zoom app. I don't end Zoom calls myself as the meeting admin ends it. Everyone said, "Bye, nice meeting you all," and I naively assumed the call ended. I vented my frustration by saying, these salespeople are like wolves when the country is going through crappy times. A coworker sent a chat message a few minutes later that everyone heard what I just said. No one complained or confronted me, but this offended them. Also wanted to add, all sales team members are not like this. Almost all the new sales reps are eager to learn from everyone and not pushing stuff but talking to customers. However, new sales reps mostly handle small or low priority contracts. Any big contract gets automatically transferred to sales leadership. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I have to say, that was absolute textbook perfect malicious compliance. And if you have ever gotten malicious compliance in your life, for example in a company, at your job or anywhere else, please let us know in the comments. Either way, I hope you enjoyed today's video and I will see you again tomorrow.